This episode of this Focused Practical Dreamer's Journey is brought to you by energy healer Jean Border's personal, powerful transformation program. Know you're leaving money on the table, but can't figure out how to bring it in? Need to double your productivity and profitability? Need an extra push to get things moving in the right direction? Visit www.focusedpracticaldreamer.com/transformation now and apply for a business consultation with Jean. Welcome to the Focused Practical Dreamer's Journey, where we take out your emotional baggage and heal your emotional body so you get to enjoy the success you desire and deserve. Prepare to feel a sense of relief and empowerment as we get rid of the baggage you've been carrying that's held up your business success up until now. Be sure to visit our website at www.focusedpracticaldreamer.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, get comfortable, and prepare to take off.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Jean Border, with the Focused Practical Dreamer's Journey podcast. I have a really cool guest with me here today. I'm so excited. But before I get there, I want to mention something that I've been offering up. There have been quite a few clients who have come to me with concerns about the economic situation right now and the impact that might have on their finances. So I've created a tool for everyone to use if you're familiar with tapping, EFT. Go to jeanborder.com/vow, VOW, and see if that helps you calm down your nervous system a little bit and get past a few of the tensions that I'm hearing with regard to money situations. Okay, it's just jeanborder.com/vow. And on that note, I want to introduce you to someone that I'm really thrilled to bring to you today. I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. This is Shel Horowitz, and we have met several times in several different venues. But what's interesting about Shel is he is an activist, and he focuses on how saving the world can also help grow your business. I think that's so cool. Hi, Shel. How are you?
Hi, Jean. I'm doing just great. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here. Why don't you just do a brief introduction of yourself so our listeners can find out some really cool things about you?
Okay. Well, it all started when I was a teenager, or actually slightly before I was a teenager. I went to my first demonstration about the Vietnam War in October 1969. I was 12, almost 13.
Wow.
And that's the day that I became an activist, because I was listening to the speeches, and one of the speakers said, "The Vietnam War is an undeclared war." And I had not known that. And what that did to my little inculcated with social studies class brain is like, oh, the whole bit about checks and balances doesn't actually work. They lied to us. So that was a deeply catalyzing moment for me. And then a few months later came the first Earth Day. By that time, I was already 13. And so it started with peace, but very quickly expanded to include the environment. And not terribly long afterwards, I became a marketer because I wanted to market the work I was doing as an activist. So my first foray was writing news articles for actually the right-wing alternative paper at my high school, which ran my stuff with disclaimers, but I was 15 and getting bylines and getting published. So I was totally willing to have this does not represent the management stuff, because they were letting me write about peace demonstrations in Washington or Manhattan, and letting me really talk about some of the issues that were already becoming very important to me. So for all the way back to 1972, I've been both a marketer and an activist. And then I'm going to do a little show and tell. I'm going to walk you over to the window where you and your listeners can see a mountain behind the barn, hopefully. And yeah, that mountain is Mount Holyoke, also known as Skinner State Park in Hadley, Massachusetts. And that mountain has been protected land for a long time, but about a year after I moved to this neighborhood, a developer announced that he was going to put 40 McMansions on the next mountain. And you could see them from the top of that one, which is like where everybody takes their out-of-town friends, because you have this incredible 4-state view on this little 900-foot mountain. And I was the one who said, I don't think so. So the movement that started in my dining room was called Save the Mountain, and we saved the mountain. And not only did we do it, but we did it really quickly. I even thought it was going to take us 5 years, and we did it in 13 months flat, so a year and a month. And I was really kind of overwhelmed by how much community support we had for keeping that mountain pristine. And it really changed a lot of my thinking about activism. At that point, I'd been an activist for more than 20 years, but they're always learning. I don't know about you, but I'm constantly in learning mode at age 67. And I learned more on that campaign than I think I learned in any other political activity I have ever done in my life. And I came away from that experience thinking, wow, I just did this amazing organizing campaign for 13 months where I used every little bit of stuff that I knew about marketing and a lot of stuff that I hadn't known previously that other people in the group were involved with, such as lobbying and what kinds of endangered species were growing near me and all sorts of things that were really totally new to me. And then I thought, well, if I can bring all my business experience into the activism side, what lessons from activism can I bring to business? So it was really around 2002 that I started thinking seriously about that. And by 2003, I had published the first of 4 books on how ethical, environmentally focused, social change-oriented businesses were actually primed for better success. The most recent of those 4 books, and the old one still in print, is this one, Guerrilla Marketing to Heal the World. It's one of the guerrilla marketing books, the series that J. Conrad Levinson started. I actually did 2 in the series. The earlier one was called Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green. And I really started exploring. The more I explored, the more excited I got, because it turns out that pretty much every study I've ever seen, and at this point, having done 4 books, I have seen a lot of studies, shows that there are huge advantages to business in doing the right thing. For starters, you have a much greater loyalty of both your clients or customers and your employees. So you're not always having to constantly hire to replace people. You're not always having to reach new markets because your old customers are dropping off. That's one enormous advantage. Another, interestingly enough, is if you're going green the right way, you are actually cutting expenses. You're going to knock your fuel bill down significantly, for example. And even a company as non-tree hugger as Walmart understands this on a really deep level. Walmart actually saves, I don't remember the figure, but it's in the 8 figures a year, I think, of what they're saving on fuel costs for their trucks, energy costs for their stores and warehouses. And they are also marketing a lot of very green products, energy efficient light bulbs, organic food. Here's something really bizarre. Walmart sells more organic food last time I checked than Whole Foods. And the really interesting thing is they are selling it to people who ain't never gone to a Whole Foods in their lives. So they've doubled the market. They've added a whole nother section of people that are buying from them who would not buy from the traditional places to get organic food. And I have a lot of issues with Walmart as a company. I don't shop there because I don't like their store siting and their labor policies. But I'm really grateful for the work they're doing on the environment and on bringing these foods and products to mainstream conservative audiences of farmers and truck drivers and teachers and nurses in all around the country. So they have recognized something that I talk about when I give my talks. I talk about the different kinds of buyers for green or social change products or services, starting with the deep greens, who are people like me who live this. Then the lazy greens, people like my mother-in-law, who told me that she always bought a particular recycled brand of toilet paper in her New York supermarket because it was recycled. Well, really, she bought it because not only was it recycled, but it was right next to the non-recycled in the supermarket she was already going to. So she was happy to do the right thing when it was convenient. And then there are the non-green and the hostile, the anti-greens. And those two categories you have to sell very differently than you sell the greens. You have to sell them on the product benefit. And
I've never heard those categories before.
This is something I created.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's why I have not heard of them. I'm like, I hear a lot of things, but I've never heard those categories.
You don't have to heard me speak. There are other people. Suzanne Shelton has some similar analyses, but she uses different terms. And I'm sure there are others.
But I totally get your mother-in-law's version, because that's much easier for people to start to take on, right? It's like a step that they can take without putting themselves out.
Exactly. And that's a very important market.
Yeah.
And then you can move people along that continuum by making them aware that it's because your product has these green or social equity features that it's able to offer these benefits. This mattress is so soft because we use all natural fiber grown by all natural farmers. This product is really good for your liver because it has no funky chemicals in it. Those sorts of things are how I'm pretty sure Walmart is selling all that organic food. They're probably selling them on the health benefits and of course, the price benefit of getting them from there instead of from Whole Foods. And yeah, it's really interesting to me to see how in my area, which is a rural area, as you saw, that everybody agrees on the value of keeping open space, of keeping the nature we have. That's not a controversial thing. During the Save the Mountain campaign, it was 2000. It was a presidential election year. And I would drive around town or bike around town. I would see lawns that had a nadir sign and a Save the Mountain. I would see lawns that had Gore and Save the Mountain. And yes, I saw Bush and Save the Mountain on the same lawn. We had almost a complete consensus in town that that project was not appropriate. It's really amazing, as somebody who's been organizing since my teens, to actually be involved in a movement that has consensus of the entire community. Other than the developer and a few of his friends, nobody wanted this. And
but the crucial part of that is that somebody had to lead the charge.
Yeah. And
somebody had to have the knowledge and the drive to say, guys, let's get together. These are the steps we need to take. This is the focus we need to have.
Yeah. I think it might have happened without me. Somebody else might have jumped in, but I was there and I had this unique combination of activism and marketing. And we got a lot of play in mainstream press. We had, in the 13-month campaign, we had 70 newspaper articles. I don't know how many letters to the editor, including my daughter's entire 6th grade class wrote letters, and about half of those got published.
Aww.
And we had a couple of dozen radio and TV interviews. And, the piece of marketing I often focused on is getting mainstream press. So we didn't really have a blogosphere back then. But we did have email communication, and we had one discussion list for our core group and another one for the whole network. And those were very effective. Nobody was organizing on it, pretty much. So we were able to really be pioneers with that. And we got enormous support. And I really believe that a lot of the reason we won was because of mindset. Because I went into that campaign thinking, we are not going to let that monstrosity happen. And we have a number of ways we can stop it. I don't know yet which one it's going to be. And in fact, the way we stopped it was a way I hadn't thought of, but our legal committee had thought of it. And they were working on it for months because a donor, a philanthropist, had come to them and said, I'd like to buy that land and give it to the state. What do you think? And that happened in March. And from March to December was basically working out the logistics and the legalities of how that was going to work. So really, in a sense, we won 4 months into the campaign. I didn't even know it until much, much later. I found out about what the legal committee was actually doing only a few days before it went public. They didn't want to tell even me until they were really sure that it was going to work.
And what you're describing in my world is the power of team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Different people come together with different skill sets, with different levels of expertise. Some are great at communication, some are good at research, some are good at legal, some are good at marketing, some are good at writing, some are good at networking, some are good at bringing the community together as a group.
Mm-hmm.
But the more strength you provide to your team, the more you can accomplish more quickly, more streamlined. I'm very big on the power of team.
Yes, absolutely. And we had teams. We had several subcommittees. From that initial meeting in my dining room, we formed quite a few different subcommittees, and they were all well staffed. I had been used to activist groups with no budget and like 5 people in the core group and 20 people who would come to a meeting. We had 70 people show up that night, and another 30 call me up and say, I really want to be involved. It's not a good night for me. And when the dust shook away, we had about 35 in the core group. It was the largest core group I'd ever worked with. And it was phenomenal. Everybody had their areas that they were working in. And it was just a miracle. And we had cooperation from elected officials. We had cooperation from unelected people in town government. Town clerk used to, I would go in there to make a photocopy of some document, and she would say, oh, I'm supposed to charge you for this, but since it's for Save the Mountain, wink, wink. She was known as a conservative. She's not somebody I was ideologically aligned with at all. But she was in support of what we were doing.
And that's another point. Political views are just that. Everybody's got their own view. But if there is a mission that everyone wants to see happen, the political stuff it's an irritant, You set it aside, you take care of the mission or the job or the focus, whatever. My dad was Air Force. I'm telling you now, my dad was Air Force. And I was DOD for 36 years. So I speak sometimes in military speak or civilian speak. And so I speak of mission. Mm-hmm. But to me, your mission was to save the mountain, to save the green space of the mountain. That was your mission. That was your calling. That was your passion.
Yep. Yeah.
And so politics can fall away if you allow them to fall away for the good of the world or the globe or the whales or whatever your focus is to save. Right?
Yeah. I'm reading a really interesting book right now by the founder of an activist group called Results that I was not familiar with before picking this book up. And it's all about building an empowering and transformational activist organization. And teams were very much a part of what he's writing about. And encouraging people to take the next step and the next step and the next step. You start by writing a letter to the editor, and next thing you know, you're on the phone with the editorial writer trying to get them to write something. And then you leverage the published editorial to get a meeting with your member of Congress, and on it goes. And they have an incredible success record. I'm really quite thrilled to have come across this book. I'm going to be reviewing it in my April newsletter.
And that's something else that in business is very important, just like it is in activism. Find someone who's good at what you want to do and model them. They've already messed up all the, they've done all the side steps. They messed up all the stuff. They've already made all the mistakes. Learn from their mistakes and follow the step-by-step process that they've already figured out. Which is what you're saying is in that book. Just follow the steps. Now, yeah, you're going to have to adjust occasionally because your topic is slightly different than theirs, but you've got a proven track record there. Follow that, follow the model.
That reminds me of the great quote from Thomas Edison when somebody asked him, how did it feel to fail 10,000 times before he successfully invented the light bulb? It wasn't a failure. It was a 10,000 step process.
Exactly. And that's something I you'll hear me say that a lot. One step every day. You're not done until you stop taking a step, right? And you have to make course corrections all along the way. If you're in a boat, the wind's going to push you around. The swells are going to knock you away. But you keep your eye on that little lighthouse or that rock or that beach or whatever, and you just make little course corrections and you get there.
Yeah.
But if you don't take the next step, you're doomed to fail.
Yeah, and if you don't make those course corrections, you end up on the wrong island.
Exactly. And then you're like, well, I tried. Well, did you really? Or did you just let the wind buffet you around? There's a difference, right?
There's absolutely a difference. At the same time, you do want to allow for serendipity.
Yeah.
But you don't let it completely control things. If the serendipity doesn't line up in your favor, you go do something else that will.
Yeah. And every day you make a choice. Am I moving in the right direction? Is that still my focus, or is something else really what I was aiming for all along?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have the clarity yet to see it. And I had to take these steps to become clear.
Yeah. And if anybody looks at my life on one level, it looks completely chaotic. But if you go to the 30,000 foot level, you see that I was basically making my way through a maze. And it was, at this point, 40-something year journey. But it's been, I can see the roots of where I am today in where I was 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Okay. So sorry, but I have to do this. So I'm in a state called Ohio. And back in the day, you spent some time here.
You were part of Ohio, in fact, in Southwest Ohio. I was a student at Antioch College, and that was a left-wing hippie school in the middle of a very, very conservative area. We were, I think, 8 miles from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We were also 8 miles from Xenia, which was this town that got flattened by a tornado in 1974. And one of the really interesting things was that all the students on campus, all the staff, just pitched in to help that community, which most people had never set foot in unless maybe they got off the bus there and then got a ride to Antioch.
I did also. I didn't realize you were there. I was there as well after the tornado. I was in a high school group called the Explorers Club. And as one of our community projects, we went out to, what was it, Arrowhead, I think it was called. I don't remember, but it was out in Xenia where the tornado hit, and we were trying to help the people. Their houses looked like matchsticks. Mm-hmm. And we were just trying to help them find anything that they could find of theirs that was salvageable.
Yeah.
Clothing.
I heard all this from afar. I was not on the ground there because Antioch, as you probably know, is you alternate periods of work and study. And I had just finished my study period and I was in New York on one of the work co-ops. So I was not helping with that relief effort, but I knew that Antioch had really pitched in. And, it's a lot of the work that I've done over the last few decades has been about getting people to work together who may not have thought that they should be working together. And, you're from a military background. I'm from a peace activist background. We're having this wonderful conversation. And I had my first conversation like that actually in front of the gates of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 8 miles from Antioch. We were there protesting probably the Vietnam War. I'm not even sure at this point. But what I do remember is that some of us just went up to the National Guard people on the other side of the fence and just started having conversations. And then I had more conversations like that. My one and only arrest was at the Seabrook Nuclear Power construction site. Big sit-in. There were 1,414 people were arrested. And it turned out to be one of the most important actions I've ever been involved with. The modern American safe energy movement started there. And
wow.
Yeah. New Hampshire had very few jail cells, so they actually put us in National Guard armories, which we treated as a 2-week university. And everybody who had something to share would get up and share what they knew, and other people would learn from it. And we would be talking with the National Guard soldiers who were keeping us incarcerated, and they would talk with us. And we got to hear, what made them choose to sign up. And really, to humanize them. And that kind of work came up again in working on Middle East issues in the 1980s, where we would get Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims in a room together just to talk. And some of those discussions were pretty sharply pointed, but we were talking and we were listening. And I'm a big believer in that. I like to joke that my left-wing friends call me a capitalist tool while my right-wing friends call me a communist dupe. And my Facebook page is open to all comers as long as they're polite. So we've had some very interesting discussions over the years on Facebook about some of these things. Right now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of posts going on about Gaza. And, it makes the world a better place when people can talk to each other. I feel really bad about the way that so many people silo themselves and don't want to talk to people they disagree with. I think that's not healthy.
For a few years ago, when all the riots and things were happening just in the very recent past, no one was listening. Everyone was right. And no one was listening to anything else. And if you don't believe what I believe, then you're trash and you're dirt and get out of my face and I'm going to unfriend you. And I'm like, how is that helpful? I didn't understand the mindset. For me, mindset is a big deal.
Yes,
always working to, I'm like you, I'm a lifelong student. I'm always learning. I'm always taking classes. I'm always trying to find one more piece of great information that I can utilize, right?
And there's so much out there. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I've tried to do is popularize some of the wonderful inventions that I've come across and technologies. I mean, I know of a person who lives in the cold Colorado Rockies, just outside Aspen, Colorado, where the main industry is skiing, which is based on really cold weather and snow. And he built his house in 1984. And he built a house in Aspen with no furnace that is so well designed that he can grow bananas inside.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. 1984. Can you imagine what our housing stock would look like if that became the norm in 1984 to build a basically net zero building that is adapted for the specific climate it's in? Oh my goodness. I mean, we would not have gone to war in Iraq. Maybe the Russians wouldn't have moved in on the Ukraine because some of that is about oil too. Africa might have a very different landscape because a lot of the dictatorships in Africa are propped up by oil money. And on it goes. Plus, of course, we would have much cleaner air. We would not have the global crisis of rising temperatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this stuff is related, and most wars are resource issues, ultimately. They put on the cloak of, we don't like this ethnic group, we don't like this religious group, but it's really like, I want your water, or I want your land, or I want your oil, or I want your bauxite, whatever it is.
I want something you have.
Yeah, and I'm willing to shed blood over it because I want it that bad. So if you address the resource issues, then a lot of the need for war goes away. And people say, how can you think about addressing these enormous problems like hunger and poverty and war and catastrophic climate change? Like, you boil them down to where there's common ground and where there's solutions. And it's not that difficult. And again, it's really good for business. And the other thing I didn't mention, I talked about saving money doing the right thing, but let's also talk about the profit potential. Because and I have seen a gazillion studies on this, if you give customers a choice between two products, and one of them is involved with a social change mission and involved with planetary healing, and the other is using extractive methods and polluting and bad labor practices, well, where are you going to take your $4 for that pint of ice cream, or that $10 for that pound of coffee? You're going to go with the people who are making a difference in the way you want them to. So there's great profit potential. You have to tell people what you're doing. That household paper products company I referred to that my mother-in-law is a fan of, they went recycled really early. I mean, really early, before I was born. And they switched to all recycled paper in 1950.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they forgot to tell anybody for a long time. And I understand that because in 1950, it would have been like, ew, you're using other people's junk mail to make toilet paper? Go away. But by about 1975, that was not the case anymore. And they finally got around to telling people in the early 2000s after they were bankrupt. And lo and behold, they went very quickly from bankruptcy to being the largest seller of recycled toilet paper, napkins, paper towels in the country, even though they were only a Northeast regional brand. Company's called Markel. And yeah, so this is the business case right there. If you can bring a company back from bankruptcy and make it a market leader when it doesn't even have national penetration, that's really saying something about the loyalty you're generating. Oh, you companies like Seventh Generation that were national, that were selling a whole lot less recycled toilet paper.
So for small business owners who care about the world, care about the people in the world and the animals in the world, but they also have very small funds available, we'll say, at the moment because they're growing their business, or maybe they're solopreneurs and they only have the income that they can bring in. What are some small steps they can take to enter into that?
Okay. Well, one easy small step is to visit goingbeyondsustainability.com/freebies. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there. And the one I want to highlight right now, I just want to scroll up here and get the right exact name. 5 ways your social impact business can thrive by creating wins for people, planet, and profit. That's one of several gifts you'll find at that Going Beyond Sustainability/freebies. There's also, I happen to be launching a 5-week mastermind program at a very affordable price. I've been told by several people that I'm charging only about a third of what I should. It's $695. And that one is I actually made a tiny URL for it to make it easy to remember. tinyurl.com/FIVE weeks. And then, of course, there's the book, Guerrilla Marketing to Heal the World, that has hundreds of ideas for small businesses. But you can also, because you're on this call with Jean and me, you get to have, instead of my normal 15-minute freebie call that I give to anybody, you get 30 minutes. And in 30 minutes, we can really look at what your company does, what its strengths are, what its weak spots are, and what kind of socially conscious, environmentally conscious business you could become with the resources you already have, basically. And obviously, I'm doing that because I'm hoping it'll lead you to hire me for consulting. But it's there as a freebie. But you can book a half an hour with me and we will talk, and you will send me some stuff ahead so that the conversation will be focused and you will get value out of that conversation. It's not going to be just my trying to sell you on my consulting services. It's going to be real examinations of what your company specifically can do, because it's a very individual answer. And that's one of the things that people don't realize, is that one size fits all is a very poor answer to most situations. Dell Computer showed that it didn't work in computing, and Apple jumped on that bandwagon pretty quick. It doesn't work for farming. The conditions of the soil in my area are different from your area, even though we're pretty much at the same latitude. But I remember that one winter in Yellow Springs was way colder than winter in New York City. And probably way colder than where I am now in Western Massachusetts.
Well, actually, we're having a heat spell. The sun's out. The snow is all melting. So, yeah.
Here too at the moment.
Yeah, today is a sunny day.
But a typical January day in the 1970s, it was really cold in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it can be. We have some days that are, just a few times a year where it's below 0. But for the most part, it's not that bad.
Yeah. And I'll hike in it anyway. We have enough warm clothing. We just put it all on and we go out. The coldest hike we ever took was -7.
Oh, my goodness.
It was a short hike, 20 minutes or so.
Back in the days when you might have still been in Yellow Springs, but chances are you were gone by then. I went to college at Wright State University, and I belonged to the riding club back before they got the big concert ball sports arena built They took our riding stables and raised them to put in this arena thing. Yeah. But in the winter, we could go bareback horseback riding. Oh my gosh. 5 degrees out, that horse was nice and warm on the legs. And you're just walking along in the snow it was, like not forest areas, but wooded areas and trails. It was so nice. Oh, anyway, that was then. This is now.
I actually had a job as a park ranger in Yellow Springs owns a nature reserve called Glen Helen.
Right. I've been there.
Had
Yeah.
a student work study job as a ranger.
Oh, cool. Aren't there some places that you can begin to learn to like rappel? Or was that John Bryan?
That was probably John Bryan.
Okay.
Not a
State Park, sorry.
Yeah, right next door. But they had more like actual rock or
Right.
more gradual thing.
Back in the day, I wanted to do all that stuff. Now I'm over it. Don't need to rappel anymore. I jumped out of an airplane. That's plenty. Okay, so we talked about how people can start if they're in business. From an individual standpoint, there are so many ways that people can become, if they're not already, an activist without being preachy.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about ways that people might get into activism without just becoming. Some people don't like the visibility.
Well, first of all, you want to pick an issue or have an issue pick you. Sometimes you fall into one. I've been doing immigration justice work since 2019. I got there totally by accident. My wife went to a meeting of the group that evolved into what is now Jewish Activists for Immigration Justice that she and I are both involved in. And she was really excited. They were going to go to Homestead, Florida to witness at one of the places where the Trump administration was imprisoning migrant youth who had been separated from their families, often by the U.S. government. And she just was really wanting to do this. And I said, hey, I'll come with you if. And the if was, I want to make a side trip to Cuba. Because I've never been, and I was curious to see what Cuba was really like. There's so much propaganda on both sides. And she said yes, and we had a week in Cuba, and I've been in immigration justice ever since. But my activism around Save the Mountain was I read the newspaper story, and here I've been an environmentalist for, at that point, a couple of decades. And I had just moved from town 7 miles away to right next to this mountain. And I had a lot of contacts in the environmental community and had a big enough house to have the meeting in my dining room. And so that was more being the right place, the right time than it was the kind of accident that got me into immigration justice work. But, peace. I mean, I was at age 12 already thinking about writing my conscientious objector essay when I was going to be 17 or so. So peace has always been very, very important to me. And that issue was one that I picked and was still very important to me. So it really, that's the first step, is pick the issue and then find out who's doing good work on that issue locally. And the good work should also feel good. It should be nourishing to your spirit to do this work. And if you feel drained by it as a constant, I mean, we all get burned out and need to take breaks every day. But if you go to the first meeting or two and you think, ew, I don't like this at all, then you're probably not in the right group for you. Every group has its own style, its own ideology. And I tend to look for the groups that are very small, but do incredibly good work. I'm at some point going to write a book called The Fulcrum Principle about how to leverage these kinds of very small groups into amazing social change. I haven't gotten around to it yet. I've got a whole drawer full of file folders for books I might want to write at some point. I've done 10, and it's a big commitment to write a book, and I haven't been motivated to do one in a while. But you look for places where you're going to be valued for what you bring to the table. All those things you talked about in terms of teamwork earlier when we did Save the Mountain. Wherever you fit in, there's going to be a place for you somewhere. And everybody needs to figure that out or get some guidance in figuring it out. But she wants a place where nobody is going to attack you for who you are demographically, for example. Nobody's going to attack you because your policies aren't pure enough. It's always a process, a continuum. You're going to start someplace and you're going to move on that continuum. And how you move is going to, in some ways, be dictated by how other people react when you start to move. And this is, I think, by the way, you're the first person to ever ask me this in all the hundreds of interviews I've done.
Seriously?
Seriously. Nobody ever asks, how do you become an activist? They ask how you start a green business or a socially conscious business. I get that out all the time. But, and I actually have done some speaking about the activist side. And, but you look for where you can have impact and how to maximize that impact and how to do it in a way that nourishes you.
I work with a lot of people in the energy world, and that means people find me because they feel imbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that I work with are impacted by other people's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds weird for people not in that world, but some of, and I'm going to use the word us, can get overwhelmed by the energy in some groups.
Mm-hmm.
Some groups are very belligerent. Some groups, on the other end, are so calm and laid back that maybe they're not as productive as they could be, right?
Yep.
And so different personality types fit in different groups.
Yes. And some of it is regional. I mean, I grew up in New York City where people talk like this and they're all coming out and they, and they're all in your face. And now I live in a place where personal space is really important to people. They most of my neighbors could simply not handle the experience of being on a New York City subway.
I have to tell you this. This is totally off topic, but you brought it up, so I'm going to say it. In my career, I was in a travel job, right? And most of my career was in the Washington, D.C. area. And when I first moved there, one of the guys in the same job that I was in, but we had teams, right? He was from New York. And I thought he was just the loudest, I'm like, he was big with the hands and big with the voice.
Yep.
And I just thought he's just such a different personality until I got sent to New York City for 2 weeks. And he was everybody there.
Yep. Yep.
It was hilarious. And I'm like, I get it now. I get it.
Exactly.
I lived in Italy for almost 5 years and they had no personal space.
No.
I was enabled, right?
Yep.
If there is this much room between you and the person next to you, they're going to be in it. There is no such thing as personal bubble. There is none.
Yeah. And
so you just have to find the group that you feel comfortable in, understanding the norms of those groups and that they're not meant against you personally. That's just, normal for them.
And when I was a student at Antioch, I started attending Quaker meeting for about 10 years. And, so there I'm taking this, small laid back farm town and I'm taking the smallest, quietest part of it and inserting myself in it. And that was good discipline for me to learn how to shut up and just let things happen. Because I was definitely not brought up that way. And, but I've also lived in Georgia. I lived in Atlanta for a brief time when Jimmy Carter was actually governor, and had a college internship there working for a newspaper.
Oh.
And, their styles are very different. And here in Western New England, the style is very different. We're only 150 miles from New York and 100 from Boston, but it is a completely different way of life. And if you try to go in with it, what is that movie? Norma Ray, I think it is, where there's a union organizer.
Labor union, yeah.
Who has to figure out how to function in the Deep South. And you have to meet people where they are, and you don't have to lose your accent, but you have to notice that this is not an interrupting culture, and this is a culture where everybody will feel invaded if you were more than 18 inches away from them. And this is a culture where people will feel like there in a park if you're more than 4 inches away from it. So all of these things are very significant. What age you are has a lot to do with how you think about the world. I had the privilege in my 20s of being a nominally paid organizer, Vista volunteer, $82 a week.
Wow.
Living in New York City, no less, to organize the Brooklyn chapter of the Grey Panthers. So I was dealing with people who had been radicalized in the 1930s. And that was amazing. I mean, I learned so much from them. And it also was amazing to me because now, as I see 70 in the near horizon, and that was an age where in my 20s, I would have thought, that's really old, he's 67. Doesn't feel old to me right now, I'll tell you that. And I want to be like my friend Frances, who on her 100th birthday was asked what she wanted. And she said, I want a demonstration with 100 people carrying signs for 100 causes. And being Frances, she got 300, and she was too impatient to wait for the police escort. So she said, we're starting now. And our state senator and the then mayor of Northampton, where this was happening, went out in the street to stop traffic so that this demonstration with 300 people could
Oh.
on her 100th birthday.
Oh.
She came actually to one of our talkbacks about the detention center in Florida. That was just a couple of weeks before she died. And she was there to listen and learn. And I found out that she was working, after she died, a friend of hers who was also a friend of mine told me that they had been working together on developing a personal climate assessment instrument. Mm-hmm. So you're never too old to be an activist. And as people like Malala and Greta Thunberg have shown us, you're never too young to be an activist. My younger child at age 6 organized a fundraiser for Save the Mountain.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Not a very
family affair.
Yeah, it was. My daughter got her class to write letters, and the other one did this little fundraiser going to local businesses and getting them to donate prizes for a raffle.
And I'm going to go a step further and say there's some people who won't feel comfortable or won't be physically or emotionally able to put themselves out there to be a part of the group, but something that is always useful is funding for the causes. Mm-hmm. And that's something that a lot of us do have the resources for.
Yeah.
So find what you're passionate about, where you seem to be drawn. For me, it's the basics. I go back to the basics of food, the basics of water, and the basics of survival. There are charities that I really push. One is called Charity Water.
I know Charity.
And they are all over the world in places where people are drinking contaminated water and they know it, and they have no access to fresh water. And their children, as soon as they are a year old or whatever, start to be drinking the water, the family knows they're going to be sick because they know the water is bad. Mm-hmm. Charity Water goes in. Every penny that you donate goes specifically to building wells.
Yeah. And, Scott, the founder, has a really interesting autobiography. Because he was not your typical actor. This is really transformational because he was a party guy.
Yes, he was.
No social conscience whatsoever. And then he founded this amazing organization. I actually I mentor somebody who is in Kenya and involved, among other things, with trying to get decent water over there. And I tried to connect him with Charity Water, and it didn't work out. So I actually I had been a monthly contributor to Charity Water, and I'm now giving that money to Interior's project in Kenya directly because he can't get the funding from Charity Water. I also helped him start a library. My daughter actually works for an effective altruism organization, so the apple didn't fall far from the tree. But it's amazing to me how far a $50 contribution can go to buying books in places like Kenya and Uganda. And I've now done 2 years in a row a $50 contribution to a community in each of those countries to buy books.
There's so many things that you can do that you don't realize. Well, another organization that I'm very drawn to is, I mentioned water and now is food, and it's called Feeding America.
Mhm.
And that's just the basics of giving people meals who would otherwise not have food to eat, which is, for most of us, I mean, if you're on a Zoom, you've got money for food, most likely.
Well,
You know, if you can pay for internet, if you can pay for a computer, if you can pay for a phone, chances are you can find food. You've got the money. It's where is your priority today? But some people don't have that option.
yes. And I was very grateful in my youth for the food stamp because I was on food stamps and it made a real difference in my ability to survive. And especially right before I got that Vista job, because that $82 a week was actually an increase in my earning power. I had been unemployed, and that was a lifeline for me. The safety net started to get frayed under Reagan, and it's not in great shape. And it's one of the things we really need to rebuild. But we also, I think, we need to look at different approaches to poverty besides just giving money. And giving money is important, but also technological assistance. I have a friend named Dean Sycon who, for 30 years, he just retired and gave his company to his employees. He ran a company called Dean's Beans, which from the very first bean that they bagged in 1993 was 100% organic and fair trade. Whereas companies like Starbucks and Green Mountain, they are in the single digits with how much percentage they are doing organic fair trade. So right from the start, this was a different sort of company. But what Dean did is he took the profits and reinvested them in community-led development projects in the lands where he was sourcing coffee. So people in Kenya or Guatemala or Ethiopia or wherever would decide what kind of project they would want to do and organize the infrastructure to support it, and he would fund it.
Nice.
Very. Yes.
And that's something we can all aspire to, but we all have to get started first.
Yeah. And there's so many paths. I mean, you cannot really, it's really hard to believe that you couldn't find a path that will make the world better and also help you be successful. There's just so much out there. And I know the conventional wisdom is that you either have to be a money-hungry, profit-driven business, or you can be concerned about the world, and you can't do both. And that is utter nonsense.
Agree. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time together. Time goes by so fast when I'm having a really cool conversation with a really cool person. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners? I know we talked about so many aspects of this, but there may be something else that you'd
want to emphasize one thing, but before I do want to remind people of all the resources I mentioned earlier at goingbeyondsustainability.com, and including that if you mentioned that you were listening to this call, you can have a whole half hour with me. But I want to talk about the idea that one person can make a difference. Ordinary people can make a difference. I mean, you think about some of the great leaders in our, Martin Luther King was a preacher at a small church. Greta Thunberg was not only just a high school student, but one with autism. And Mother Teresa was a nun working in Calcutta. All of these people are ordinary people. Lech Walesa, who became the first president of a free Poland, was a shipyard electrician. Can it get more ordinary than that? But your voice is amplified when you work with other people. You can do much, much more together than you can solo. You can also do something solo. I mean, I have seen a few places where me acting alone actually did make a difference. But I've also seen many more where me acting in a much larger group made a bigger difference. So get out there and do. I mean, we have unbelievable potential. We have this incredibly connected world where you and I can be chatting 700 miles apart, and we could just as easily be chatting if I were in Japan and you were in Rhodesia. It's not Zimbabwe. It hasn't been Rhodesia for a long time. That was a brain slip.
Showing your age.
Well, I'm proud to grow older. And I had that wonderful year and a half with the Grey Panthers, and I have had great role models all my life older. And I'm at an age where I have a grandchild and I enjoy him enormously. And I've always made, even though I've been an activist since age 12, I've never forgotten to have fun along the way. I actually wrote a book in 1995 called The Penny Pinching Heathen. It's all about how to have fun cheaply.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you again for being here with me today. This was Shel Horowitz. All his information, the links will be down below. Just click on the link. It'll take you straight to all the gifts he mentioned. He's got several websites that have really cool resources on them. I want to thank all my listeners for tuning in. I want to thank Shel for being here. And think about being an activist in any way that feels comfortable for you. And think of how you can utilize that in your marketing to help grow your business and your profits and help the world at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. The more money you bring in, the more money you have available to help. Until next time, this is Jean Border with the Focused Practical Dreamers Journey podcast. See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Focused Practical Dreamers Journey, where we take out your emotional baggage and heal your emotional body so you get to enjoy the success you desire and deserve. Remember to visit our website at www.focusedpracticaldreamer.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Focused Practical Dreamers Journey.